For years, the two major political parties in India have used the dollar exchange rate as a political weapon.
अरे नेपाल का रुपया नहीं गिरता है, बांग्लादेश की करेंसी नहीं गिरती है,
रुपए
पाकिस्तान
का
की
कीमत इतना गिर गया, अभी 1-2 दिन में तो 100 रुपए हो जाएगा $1।
If the rupee goes down, it's national shame. If it goes up, it's national pride. That's how we react. But while we go around in circles on this issue, countries like China, Vietnam, Uzbekistan, Indonesia have actively devalued their currencies in the past. Now, this is counterintuitive to what we have traditionally been told in India. Why would any country want to devalue its currency? That makes me ask a question. Are we focusing on the right issues, right things, and asking the right questions? Or are we too fixated on a psychological number that makes little sense, but the things underlying are the main problem? And that's what we're going to find out in this video. So before we dive in, let me explain in simple terms how the exchange rate works. So the exchange rate works on something simple: the money that goes outside the country and the money that comes inside the country. First, let's break down the trade deficit. So we have two trades. One is merchandise trade and the other one is services trade. So first, let's take a look at the merchandise goods. That is the physical goods. So India sells about $440 billion outside. Those include like medicines, engineering goods, textiles, and other items. And that's what comes inside. Then we have $770 billion going outside the country. This is for crude oil, gold, silver, and other luxury items. And the deficit that we have is around $330 billion. That's the amount that we are missing in our cash flows. And then comes our savior, the services trade. We export around $420 billion of engineering goods, that is software and all of that. And then we import around $210 billion of services from abroad. So the surplus that we have is $210 billion. That covers up a lot of deficit that's been created by the merchandise trade. That's the physical goods trade. But that doesn't totally cover up the deficit that we have. We had a $330 billion deficit, and then we have $210 billion of surplus coming in from services side, but we still have around $120 billion of deficit. Now then comes the other savior. We get about $110 billion in remittances. That's from people who are staying abroad and sending back money to India. That's the highest in the world. Then we have foreign investors who trust in Indian companies. They come and build factories in India or buy up shares of companies in India. And that comes to about $70 billion. And then we have a smaller part, which is the loans part. Usually companies in India lend money from outside the country because interest rates are lesser abroad. So they just lend money from there and import it to India. And that comes to about $20 billion. This sums up to around $200 billion. And that is about like $110 billion coming from remittances, $70 billion coming from foreign investors, and $20 billion coming through these loans that these companies take. So to sum up everything, we have a $330 billion deficit coming from physical goods trade. Then we have a $210 surplus coming from services trade. And then we have $200 billion of surplus coming from cash flows from abroad. So overall, we have $80 billion of surplus in forex reserves that the RBI maintains. So that's how the exchange rate works. The service exports and the remittances keep strengthening the rupee, whereas the merchandise goods deficit keeps pushing down the rupee. So it's a tug of war between these two things. That's why the exchange rate stays at 95. It doesn't weaken to $1 equal to 1,000 rupees, nor does it strengthen to $1 equal to 1 rupee. It stays in between. Now, why would a country devalue its currency? It makes its exports more competitive in the market. Let's take the example of this watch. Suppose this cost me 100 rupees to make. It would cost an equivalent of $1 in the United States. So a person there can just buy this for $1. But what if tomorrow $1 equals to 200 rupees? I can make two watches and still sell it at $1. So a person in the United States can buy two watches for the same $1. That makes the watch I make cheaper to a person in the US. Therefore, my exports from India become much more competitive in comparison to other countries. Therefore, that boosts my entire exports system. So depreciating rupee is actually good because our exports become much more competitive. Our pharma goods, our software are much more competitively priced amongst other countries. But then why doesn't every country just devalue their currency? And that's because we import as well. If the rupee keeps crashing, our imports get affected. We'll need to convert more rupees to get the same number of dollars, therefore affecting all the things that we buy from outside. Therefore, while it benefits exports by crashing the rupee, it's important to ensure that it is in balance so that it doesn't affect our import bills. So in May of 2026, there are two issues going on with the rupee. One is the FPIs and FIIs are going away. The other one is the massive increasing price of crude oil due to the war in Iran. Therefore, this is increasing the merchandise good deficit that we have, and at the same time, the surplus that we are getting from capital inflows from FPIs, that's also going away. And that's why the pressure on the Indian rupee at this point of time. So, foreign investors are of two kinds. One is foreign direct investments, the people who come in and actually build factories. The other ones are foreign institutional investors and foreign portfolio investors who just come in and just buy stocks from a computer. And these people who buy stocks from their computers are the main issue. They can just pull out their money just like this by clicking a sell button on their computer. This leads to billions of dollars just vanishing from the market within seconds, and that puts real pressure on the rupee. These foreign investors, the moods can change instantaneously once they can feel Indian markets are attractive, and then immediately, because there's the AI thing going on in the US, they immediately shift capital from here to there, and immediately there's a pressure on the rupee. So how do we fix this? The short-term fix is to attract back FIIs and FPIs to immediately start supporting the rupee. The immediate next step would be to cut down taxes and make the market much more attractive to them to start pumping those dollars in. Of late, the government has usually tried to play down the situation of FIIs leaving the country by saying, hey, our domestic investors will support the markets. We don't need FIIs. Let them go away. Our domestic investors are there. But it is starting to become an issue, and we need to start bringing them back in. And the other solutions, it's not just coming and asking people to stop their gold or going out and stopping their international holidays. It's not simple. People just don't follow like that. There needs to be a push in other sectors, and some of those sectors are these. First step is tourism. Why are people going outside and spending $30 billion annually when they can spend their holidays in India? The infrastructure in India is crumbling. Domestic tourists are taken for granted. The facilities, the hotels, none of them improves, none of them is world class. And therefore, the domestic tourists want to spend their money on something much more valuable, something that's more worthwhile, and that's why they start to leave the country, and they're spending $30 billion every year just on travel outside. And when domestic tourists are taken for granted, what about international visitors? No one cares about them. They are also taken for granted. We are falling back on smaller countries like Thailand, Vietnam in terms of tourism. We're at least missing out on $20 billion of additional capital inflows into the country by not developing or focusing on our tourism sector. And you know what? Tourism should actually get boosted because the people who are coming from outside, the same dollar that they convert should get more rupees, therefore they can get better value, and it feels cheaper for them to spend in India. But we are not creating an environment for them to spend. And another one is to develop our Indian local bond markets. Usually, if companies in India want to borrow money, they go abroad and get money in USD and get it converted to Indian rupees. But when they have to repay it back, they have to convert those rupees to dollars again, putting pressure on the rupee. Why do we need to do that? Why can't we put up a system in India to ensure companies in India borrow from Indian investors, and therefore the trade happens in rupees, not putting the pressure on the rupee when it's converted to dollars? The other two are usually long-term bets. One is obviously fuel substitution. We'll need to start reducing our crude oil imports, and to do that, it's important that we substitute our fuels with something that's more sustainable. They're doing that with ethanol and isobutanol for diesel, but the communication from the government has been pretty bad. There's a lot of mistrust among the public in terms of compliance of vehicles for these new fuels, and that needs to change. The next one is shifting towards higher margin exports instead of the lower margin things like textiles. We'll need to move towards electronics, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, where we get higher margins that are less sensitive to the exchange rate, and that's going to be important for us as well. Amidst all this drama, there's one player who's playing well, and that is the RBI. RBI has systematically accumulated $700 billion of forex reserves to ensure that our economy is insulated from external shocks or speculation attacks. They are acting logically, independent of political constraints, as well as keeping the geopolitical shocks in mind. They're slowly depreciating the rupee to ensure that there's no shock in the economy and everyone just slowly adapts to it. So to summarize, in India, the exchange rate is a political weapon, but in other countries, they use it as a tool to make their exports much more competitive or reduce their import bills. A slowly depreciating rupee is certain. That's how economy works, and that's going to make our exports competitive. But at the same time, a crashing rupee is something of a concern. But overall, the concern that we really need to discuss is reducing dependence on goods from outside and how we start substituting some things in India or develop some things in India so that money doesn't go out and more money comes in. Thanks for watching Broken by Design. Stop questioning that single number and start questioning the entire structure. Start questioning why our exports haven't risen. Start questioning why our import bill stays high. Start questioning why our tourism doesn't get developed and things like that. That's the focus of this channel. So do subscribe for more and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.